Hi, and welcome back. We're on to the next stage of our introduction to startup strategy. I know you'll have just gone through, previously gone through the video around the lean startup. Apologies, it was a little bit longer than I had anticipated, but hopefully you can see the key points that we were bringing out there. The point around focusing on the problem that we're essentially trying to solve for, defining that problem, and then, of course, moving then towards the solution that we can then actually offer to our customers. So another area which is rather similar to the lean startup, which we'll go through, and once you start going through this part of design thinking, you'll see the similarities and the crossovers. But I think it's another methodology that's definitely worth understanding. And whilst I can't do it justice in the time that I'll speak about it, in fact, design thinking, similarly to the lean startup, is a huge world, and there's so much that you can discover in there. So we'll only be touching on a few topics within there, but I think that these are the certain pieces that will really allow us to go from 0 to 1. So let's first have a look at what that key idea is and how it differentiates and how it slightly differs from the lean startup. So design thinking is really focused on human-centered design. It understands that not only are we solving problems in the world, in fact, what we're really doing is solving problems and needs for humans. And humans often have very, very similar needs. And these needs don't tend to evolve at the same speed that technology evolves. So quite often, technology that we're using, the solutions that we're using are always to solve very similar needs that we've always had. So if we want to get from somewhere from A to B really quickly, well, first of all, we could try running. Then second of all, it was horse and carts. Then we started to create the car. And then we started to move on to from the car through to trains. And then we moved on to an airplane. So essentially, whilst the technology was evolving and the solution was changing, the problem always stayed the same. We're always trying to move from point A to point B in as quick a time as possible. And so actually, by really focusing down on what is it and what need we're trying to solve, again, it's very, very similar to what problem are we trying to solve before we then move on to the actual solution. So as you can see here, there are sort of stages as well to the design thinking process, similarly to as there were to the lean startup process. So here we're looking at empathizing and defining. This is really about understanding our customer and understanding the problem that we're trying to solve. The ideation area is what ideas can we come up with that would be a solution to that particular problem. Then once we've honed in on a couple of ideas, or maybe one specific idea that you like that can solve that problem, can solve that human need, we then move on to prototyping. And prototyping is essentially exactly the same as building a minimum viable product. And what did we say around that build, measure, learn feedback loop was essentially the testing process. So first we've empathized and defined, we've understood our customer, understood the problem that we're trying to solve. We're then looking at potential ideas that we can bring in, an idea bank as such. And then off the back of that, we want to then build a prototype, an MVP, which we're then going to test in the market. And then we will implement that in the market once we're ready to go. But as you can see, it's always a feedback loop. This is what it's all about. And so previously, the idea of entrepreneurship was that you had an idea, you built it, you launched it, and then hopefully it worked. Now, instead, you have an idea of what you're trying to solve, you get feedback on that. Once you've been able to nail that and validate that, you then move on to the solution, a potential solution. You then get feedback on that. You decide whether there's a pivot or you persevere. If you decide to persevere because you think it's getting traction, how do we know it's getting traction? Because of the metrics that we're going to be using. This has to be defined specifically to what your own business is. So for example, if I sit down and look at the interna, which is connecting interns and startups, I want to know that I've got multiple interns who are coming back, or multiple students that are asking for more information. And I've got startups who are actually asking to put internship opportunities on the website, right? So we're really looking at, is this actually working? Is it solving a need? What's the feedback that I'm getting back, that's going to then indeed change the way that I work? So that's sort of the key overarching idea of design thinking. I certainly haven't done justice there because it's a huge, huge world. I definitely recommend you learning a lot more around it. And hopefully the videos you'll go through in the additional material here will allow you to do just that. Now, one of the key things that I really want you to take away from design thinking, and actually want you to do this as well yourselves, is around the idea of building a persona. So if you've heard of a persona before, fantastic. If you haven't, a persona is essentially a persona is, in our minds, or essentially our ideal customer. So who is the ideal customer for your business? So the problem that you're solving, who is the person that you're solving that problem for? Who is it that's going to absolutely love your product? And once you've got an idea of who that is, let's try and document that. And what design thinking does that perhaps Lean Startup doesn't is it dives deeper into the customer that we're trying to solve for. So whilst Lean Startup is really around getting out of the building and talking to customers, very similar to design thinking, the Lean Startup tends to just really focus on trying to define what that problem is, not necessarily the person as such that we're trying to solve that problem for. And so what we're trying to do is understand our customer inside out. We're trying to essentially fit into their shoes and not only understand how they're solving the problem that we're looking at, but in fact, how they live their life day to day. We want to have a look at, let's take, for example, here, and this is a persona, Sarah, who's a student. We're saying this could potentially be our ideal customer for whatever we're solving for, whatever your business idea is. You want to have a persona where you can say, I'm going to make up a name and this person's called, and here we go, Sarah student. It can be anything you want. So make up a name, perhaps build a picture. That you're trying to build up a picture in your mind of someone who you're actually solving for. And you want to run, what does a day in the life look like for that person? Within that particular day in their life, they may not be using your solution or needing to solve the problem that you're defining for them. But what is their typical day going to be like? What's their typical background? How old are they? What's perhaps their marital status? Where do they live? What type of area do they live in? What type of finances are they looking for? Are they quite affluent people? Are they less affluent people? What are their online behaviors? Are they spending a lot of time on things like Instagram and Facebook on social, or are they perhaps maybe towards the older end might be focusing on grandparents, for example? Perhaps they're sort of less on social. What are they really looking to do? What are they looking to solve for? What are they wanting that your solution can actually help? What sort of influences are there around? An interesting one. What's their hopes and dreams? What do you think that person is going to want in the future? What are they worried about? What are their fears? What's top of mind when it comes to their particular fears at the moment? And what's going to make their life easier? And so by really understanding your customer, now at first you might be thinking, why would I do this? And in all honesty, I was as well. I thought, why would I now sit down and think, what does a student do? Or what would an entrepreneur actually do? I've sort of got a problem and I've pretty much got a solution. I just want to get going. And you absolutely can just get going. But taking the time, it literally takes 15 minutes to sit down and have a real think and ideate as to who your persona is. And you don't just need to have one, you can have multiple personas. And the reason I'm taking the example of the interna is because it's something that I've done myself. So I can personally tell you around what I've done and how I built it. And essentially essentially how I built this persona. And essentially what I was looking at was, I've got a young entrepreneur trying to build their business. And they're based around Europe. They might be in a startup in Italy, and they're looking at how they can actually build out their business. And what I tried to do was connect that to what a typical student would be. Now, for me, a typical when I first started the interna at university, it was a lot easier for me. I was a student. I was already in that seat, but I wasn't running a startup. Right, I hadn't been running a startup for multiple years, and so what that meant was that in terms of that, I had to try and develop this idea of who it was I was actually solving for. And what that means is that once you've got that persona, it's a lot easier to then say, would that solution really fit for this persona? So design thinking is really around human-centered design, trying to understand who you're actually solving an issue for and trying to understand that person inside out. Question is, can I just have one persona? No, you can have multiple personas. You might have 4, 5, 6 personas. That doesn't matter, but it's really around trying to say, I know the exact person, the exact type of person that my solution is for, that my product is for, that my service is for. And the better you can do that, the better you can understand your customers. And it helps you to produce a much better product, a product or service which is much more focused and much more refined on the target market that you're looking at. So one of the key tools that we're really going to be looking at, and that I'd love you to look at within design thinking, is building a persona. So if you can go away and really build out the persona that you're trying to solve for, it will massively help you in the future. The second tool that I want to show you from design thinking that I absolutely love is the idea of customer experience mapping. And the reason that I like this so much is because it was something that I had never thought about before when I was first starting. And so often, especially from our ideas of lean startup and design thinking so far, we're just thinking of the problems that we can solve there and then. So this is one specific problem that our target customer, our persona, has, and this is what we want to solve for. Customer experience mapping actually tries to go a little bit further. It tries to ask, what is the whole customer journey, the whole customer life cycle, from before they even need what you have, before they even need your solution, through to after they've used your solution. So let's take, for example, Jet2. So let's go into the airline industry. And it's not only Jet2 that have done this, multiple airlines have done this, but I think that hopefully this example really brings it out in a little bit more detail. Why do we take an airplane? So as mentioned earlier, we might want to go from A to B, right? But before we take that airplane, what are we doing? Before we go on to Jet2 to then book a flight somewhere, well, the first thing we're doing is we're saying, well, actually, we're looking to go on holiday. Let's take that persona of a family that's looking to go on holiday. And what you're doing is you're looking at certain destinations. Where could we go? This is the budget that we've got. And you're thinking, how could we make sure that over the next couple of weeks, or over a 2-week period, we're going to have a brilliant holiday? So you first start looking at destinations. Where could we go? What's the best value for money? Have they got the right activities for our lifestyle? We want to go hiking, or we just want to go on a beach holiday. So there are lots of these questions that are going through. Then finally, you've decided on the destination you want to go to. Then you'll book your plane ticket. Right, so you book your plane ticket to go there. You try and find the cheapest option that you can, or the one that suits you most. And then you use the plane, takes you from A to B. Brilliant. An airline provider has provided that service to go from A to B. Now you've arrived there, you then you've already found your hotel, you've booked it, and you go to the hotel, and then you might then look for activities, or you might have booked a few activities before. You then do that, and then you find your way back. You get a taxi, you get back to the airport, and then an airline will take you back from B to A. You go back home, and at that particular point, if we're an airline, we say, we're going to have a brilliant service that allows our customers to feel very comfortable when they're on the flight. We're going to make sure that whilst they're on the flight, they've got the right food and beverages that they might need. We're going to have in-flight sales. Well, that's absolutely brilliant. That's something that a lot of airlines do. But now let's think a little bit wider around that journey. So what about if there was something that was going to help that family decide where they wanted to go on holiday, decide and accommodate something that would essentially find something that would accommodate their needs, their budget, their wants, their hopes, and their desire for that ease. It's quite difficult to go on multiple websites to then find where's the best hotel, and actually getting to the airport, or certainly from the airport in your destination to the actual hotel, and knowing which activities to go with and what to do. Well, that's when we start to look at package holidays, right? So what airlines, not just Jet2, but lots of other airlines, but I think Jet2 have done it particularly well. You can go on and book a package holiday whereby it already suggests where you might want to go on holiday. It tries to bring down a value discount. So if you bring everything together, then it will be cheaper for you. Once you get to your destination, they might even have a bus that will take you from the airport through to your hotel. Activities already booked, your flight, your hotel already chosen in one simple step. And so what I would really suggest, and what I really liked from design thinking, was this idea of the customer experience mapping. Because what you can do is you can look at the pain points, not only whilst they're using that particular problem that you're trying to solve, but actually before and after. And what you might find is that once you've nailed that first element, then you might want to look a little bit wider and search a little bit further afield to see what other services you might be able to provide that not only, number one, differentiates your offering as a whole, but in fact also allows you to have other or multiple commercialization points along that value chain. And what that means is that you're able to then not only have that first step where we're solving that one problem, but actually we might be able to zoom out a little bit later. And so this isn't necessarily a pivot like we saw that Instagram did. Well, Instagram was, as we saw, was more of a zoom in pivot. This isn't necessarily a zoom out pivot, but it is zooming out in the sense that you're being able to offer multiple services all in one that solves several different pain points. But the only reason that you know that that pain point actually exists in the market is because you've sat down and taken the time to do that customer experience mapping. So I would suggest here that what we're really looking at is what's that what is this customer experience mapping that we're looking at? So this first of all is this awareness stage. You know, let's take Jet2. Our ads popping up that suggest that that we might want to be looking at certain areas to fly to. You know, let's suggest that the summer holidays are coming up. Where might we want to go? That consideration stage. Okay, right now we want to get a little bit more information, a little bit more detail. Understood. Right now I'm at the point where I can make a decision. And because you've been able to understand that process so well beforehand, you're able to offer a much better service to the market that will massively differentiate you and create yourself. And this is when we're looking at scaling, is creating that moated business. So something that can't necessarily be replicated very easily by somebody else. And in fact, that doesn't necessarily just need to be a scaled business. That can even be a much smaller business. When you're taking your business from 0 to 1, how can you create that moated business? And I think that's through two things that we can take from design thinking. Number one, really understanding the customer or customers or type of people that we are solving problems for and really understanding them. But also that customer experience mapping and understanding what it is that they are, or essentially understanding their journey all the way from their starting point right to the end, and understanding the multiple pain points that we see within that. So very briefly, a few key takeaways that we might want to take away here. So first one, really empathizing and understanding our audience. Try to put yourself in their shoes. Can we really define in one simple sentence? Again, take that from the Lean Startup. This is the problem we're solving, and this is how we're solving for it. Then we're looking at ideating. What ideas can we come up with? Bringing in lots of potential solutions. You can do this alone. You can do this in a group of people, but put as many ideas down as you can. They can be as wacky as you want. But we're saying we've got a hypothetical problem that we're trying to solve for, and we know that problem actually exists. And now we're trying to ideate. So put as many ideas down as you can. Then from those ideas, select one prototype, 1 or 2 MVPs that you want to then build into a useful version, a small but useful version. It's an MVP, very, very similar. And then let's test that with the market. But the key point is all around that feedback loop. It's all about the feedback loop. So bringing Lean Startup and design thinking to a close, and at risk of just repeating, but I really want to make sure you've got that point, is let's first define the problem, not the solution. Once we've defined it, we can then go out and test that with the market to see whether our problem is true and whether that actually exists in the market. If it does, wonderful. We come back and we know that we've nailed down the problem. Second, we then go and find or build this solution together. Lots of ideas of how we could solve this problem, and then pick one to try and build out. Make sure that we're then, thirdly, building out that MVP. Now that MVP, that prototype, we can then test with our customers to see whether it's right. Fourthly, we then decide whether we're going to pivot or we're going to persevere. So yes, we think this is brilliant. We've learned a lot. We're just going to change it slightly, and then we'll try and take a little bit more to market. Or have we actually suggested that we need to pivot? We've got the wrong solution. We've got the wrong problem. Once you've decided that you're going to pivot or persevere, if you're pivoting, you then start the process again. And if you persevere, that's when we're starting to move on to a product that we're then looking to commercialize a little bit more. And we can dive a little bit more into that commercialization in the second section, which is more around the sales and business development side. So hopefully that's been helpful on that side. And these are the key takeaways that you can look to. If you have really enjoyed design thinking and it's whet your appetite to learn a little bit more, then I think that it pairs perfectly well with the Lean Startup. Both really, really interesting concepts and ideas. Have a look at some further resources. A few things here to keep in mind, a couple of experts and some brilliant books to get you going. But that for today wraps up what we want to discuss on design thinking. I hope that was helpful. And the next element that we'll be really trying to dive into especially when you're doing more of the practical side, is make sure that you're building your personas and that you've got them, and that you're able to actually use them moving forward. So have a bank where you're keeping them focused, keeping them all together, have all your ideas all in one area. Make sure you're collecting all that feedback from your customers and starting to build that MVP. That MVP is what's going to be massively important for you for two reasons. The first one is that once you've built that MVP, you've got something that you can say, I've actually built this. I can actually test this with the market, and that's when you're going to get your most validated feedback. So bring that to a close. Remember, validated feedback is massively, massively important, and let's really, really understand the customer that we are trying to solve the problem for. That will massively help us going forward when you're actually trying to take your business from that stage of 0 to 1.